If you've been trying to build a creative business and you feel like everything is living in your head, where you've got 100 ideas and just no idea which one to actually do, or you're constantly a bit lost about what to focus on next, then this video is basically a free masterclass in getting that chaos into something that actually works. I've taken the best conversations from this channel, all about overwhelm, getting your business out of your head and into a system, and actually structuring things so that you get your time back. So the outfits won't match, the hair's not going to match, but that's because I've pulled together from a few different conversations that I've had on this channel, and they're all the ones that I think will actually help you here today. So the chapters are below if you want to skip ahead. Otherwise, grab a coffee, listen as you work, or watch and lock in. Okay, let's get into it. I think one of the most exhausting things about being a creative business owner is that the ideas never stop. And on the surface, that sounds like a brilliant problem to have, but it's not always. You could be mid-task, properly focused, making actual progress, then a new idea arrives and suddenly the thing that you were working on feels less important, less exciting, or less urgent than this shiny new thing that's shown up uninvited and is now taking up a lot of our brain space. The tricky part is that most of the ideas are genuinely good, and that's what makes it hard. If they were obviously bad ideas, you could just dismiss them and then go back to what you were doing. But they're not. They're interesting and plausible, and you can see exactly how they could work, which means you can't quite let them go. So they just accumulate. And what you end up with is this situation where you've got more ideas than you've ever had and somehow less clarity than you've ever had, plus the overwhelm. Because when everything feels possible, it becomes really hard to know what you're actually supposed to be doing. So in this video, I want to give you a 3-step framework for exactly that. How to filter out the ideas that are actually worth pursuing, how to organize the ones worth keeping, and how to decide what deserves your focus right now. Because a creative brain full of ideas is one of your biggest assets. It just needs a system around it. So before I get into the framework, I just want to spend a minute on what this feeling actually looks like from the inside, because I think it shows up in a few different ways, and I want to make sure that you recognize yourself in at least one of them. So for some people, it's the paralysis. The ideas are so many and so equally compelling that you genuinely can't commit to any of them. So you end up in this suspended state where you're not exactly doing nothing, but you're also not moving anything forward either. You're just reopening the same ideas and never quite landing anywhere. So for others, it's more of a shiny object syndrome, where you start doing something, it gets a little bit of traction, and then a new, shinier idea surfaces, and it feels more exciting than the thing that you're currently building. So you drift. You might pivot, maybe you half start something new, and there's always a perfectly reasonable justification for it, which is exactly what makes it so hard to recognize that as a pattern from the inside. And then there is the guilt version, which I think is the most mentally draining of all, because all of those ideas that you love and are excited about can never really get acted on, because there's just not enough time to give each thing your full attention, and that can lead to a feeling of frustration. So all of those things are the same problem underneath. Too many ideas, no system to hold them, and no clear way to decide which ones deserve your attention right now. If you're new here, my name's Meg, and I build and talk about creative businesses for people who are doing it around a very full life. So I've been building my own illustration business, Fizz and Flourish, for several years now through some really full seasons, 3 kids, a software company, a rebrand. So when I talk about having too many ideas and not enough clarity, I'm very much talking from experience. So let me give you the framework that I use to deal with all of that. Because once you have a system for it, the ideas stop feeling like a problem and they start feeling like the asset that they really are. The first step is about asking better questions before an idea gets any of your time or energy at all. Because when all of your ideas feel equally urgent and equally valid, the only way to break that feeling is to run them through a proper system. And by the way, you don't have to try and remember everything I'm talking about in this video, because I've turned the whole framework into a free 1-page download. So you can grab it from the description and use it anytime that the idea overwhelm hits. So the first question is, does this idea align with where I'm actually trying to go right now? Because an idea can be genuinely good and still be wrong for this season, your goals, or the version of the business that you're building right now. A brilliant idea that doesn't connect to your current direction isn't a priority. It's a distraction disguised as opportunity. And those are the sneakiest kind because they are so convincing. So the second question is, does this serve my audience or does it confuse them? So an idea can make complete sense to you and still pull your audience in a direction that they didn't come for. So a quick example from my own experience on my art channel, Fizz and Flourish, I was posting studio vlogs, sticker tutorials, character drawings, and business content. All the things I genuinely loved making, but the audience I'd built around, like washi tapes tutorials, for example, wasn't necessarily there for character design. And by trying to serve everyone, I ended up not quite serving anyone as well as I could. All the ideas I had were valid, they just weren't all right for the same audience. So before you act on a new idea, it's worth asking, does this add to what I'm already building? Or does it pull it sideways? Because sometimes the most exciting idea is the one that takes you furthest away from the thing that's actually working. The third question is, am I excited about this because it's genuinely a good idea or because it's new? Because new ideas have this very specific energy that can be really misleading. The novelty itself feels like validation. And learning to tell the difference between something being a strong idea and just an exciting idea right now is a skill that takes time and it's really important to work on. And the fourth question is, am I actually the right person to build this right now? Because not every good idea is yours to execute. And I think this is really easy to lose sight of when you're watching all these other businesses online. You might see someone absolutely thriving with a membership or a podcast or a particular type of product, and it looks so good that you immediately think, I should do that too. But what works brilliantly for someone else might not work for you. Not because the idea is bad, but because they have a different audience, different skills, different capacity, or they've been building in that direction for years in a way that you haven't. So the question isn't just, is it a good idea? It's, is this a good idea for me with my skills, my audience, and where my business actually is right now? Because playing to your strengths will always get you further than copying someone else's strategy. So step 2. Once you've run all your ideas through that filter, again, you can download it from the description below, the ideas that don't make the cut right now still need somewhere to go, because the problem with just dismissing them is that your brain doesn't really let go of the things that it finds interesting. So they just keep resurfacing and taking up space. And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong with brain dumps and ideas lists, because the instinct is to throw everything in one big pile and call it a day. But throwing everything into one big list doesn't really solve the problem, because you still can't tell what's urgent, what can wait, or what you're supposed to do with any of it. It's just the chaos written down. So what you actually need is for your ideas to have a status. So instead of one big pile, you've got something more like active, which are the things that you're genuinely working on, imminent, which are the things that are coming up next or ready to act on, then later, which are the things that are strong ideas, but maybe not for this season, and then parked ideas, which means that they might be interesting or you're not sure yet, or you're not ready to decide. And then you've got the done ideas, which are the things that you've either completed or you've consciously decided against, so they stop taking up mental space. And not only do my ideas have a status, they also live in different boards depending on what area of the business they relate to. So my content ideas are separate from my product ideas, which are separate from my launch ideas. And that way, when I sit down to think about content, I'm only looking at my content ideas, not everything all at once. It just makes the whole thing so much more manageable. And that's exactly how I've set it up inside our Tova. I'll leave the link in the description, but whatever system you're using, the principle is the same. Status plus category equals clarity. And just having those options means that every idea has a purpose in your business. So you know exactly where it stands and what's supposed to happen with it next. And just remember that parked idea isn't a failed idea, you're not abandoning it, you're still letting it live inside your brain dump. And just knowing that it's there for whenever you're ready to act on it frees up so much mental space for the things that are actually in the active section right now. And if you want to see what this actually looks like in practice, there's a 7-day free trial to Artova linked in the description, or just go to artova.io. And then the third step is where everything comes together. And this is the part that solves both the paralysis and the shiny object syndrome, because even after filtering and organizing, there are usually still multiple strong ideas competing for your attention, and a decision still has to be made. But here is the reframe that I think makes this feel so much less overwhelming. Deciding what to focus on isn't about picking the best idea, it's about picking the right idea for right now, given a few very specific things. The first is your current goal. What are you actually trying to achieve in this season of your business? Because the idea that best serves that goal is the one that deserves your focus, even if a different idea feels more exciting. The second is your current capacity. So some ideas are brilliant, but they just involve more time, energy, or resources than you might have right now. And a big idea in a difficult season isn't necessarily the right time to act on it, because it can end up being a source of guilt when you're unable to actually follow through with it or give it your full attention. The right idea for right now is the one that you can actually build with the capacity you've got, not the capacity you wish you had. The third is what you've already started, because there's a real cost to abandoning things partway through that kind of gets forgotten in the excitement of a new idea. So finishing something that's 70% there is almost always a better use of your energy than starting something new from scratch, even when the new thing feels more appealing right now. And the fourth is what compounds. Because given the choice between two equally strong ideas, the one worth focusing on is the one that, if you gave it your full attention, would keep working for you over time. Which one builds something rather than just adds more to your maintenance list? And the final thing I want to say on focus is that choosing one thing to focus on right now doesn't mean the other ideas are gone. They're sitting there safely organized in your brain dump with a status and just waiting for the right season. And knowing that makes it so much easier to actually commit to the thing that's right in front of you. The creative brain is one of your biggest assets. The fact that you have so many ideas and that you see so many possibilities everywhere is not a weakness. That's the part that makes you good at what you do. But without a system around it, that creative brain can start to work against you. The most exciting thing wins over the most important thing. And the result over time is a business that feels full of energy and possibility, but it doesn't actually compound or build towards anything specific. The creative business owners who build something that lasts aren't necessarily the ones with the best ideas. They're the ones who got really good at deciding which ideas to act on and when, and sticking with it long enough to see what works. So filter first, organize everything, then decide with intention. And don't forget, you can download the one-page framework for free. It will walk you through all the steps I've gone through in this video to help you filter, organize, and decide. Just go to thecreativejuiceclub.com/ideas or check the link in the description. Have you ever felt that you should just be further along by now? Like, you've got ideas, you care deeply about what you're building, and you want more for yourself and your work, but if you're really honest, your creative business just feels a bit messy, a bit unclear, and kind of all over the place. Maybe you keep jumping between ideas, or maybe you've started things, stopped things, changed direction, doubted yourself, and then convinced yourself you need a completely new plan. You might look at other creatives online and just feel like they seem so certain. They seem so clear on what they're doing, what they're selling, who they help, what their style is, and what their message is. And meanwhile, you're sitting there thinking, why does everyone else seem to have a path except for me? And I know this feeling because I've been there. And one of the hardest parts about this feeling is that you start questioning your ability, your potential, and your own judgment. And you start wondering whether maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're too distracted, too inconsistent, too late, or just not very good at sticking with anything. So in this video, I want to talk about what's really going on when you feel lost in your creative business, and why I don't think it means what you think it means. The answer isn't to suddenly find your one perfect thing or wake up one morning with total clarity. I think it's usually much more grounded than that. So let's get into it. Feeling lost doesn't always mean that you're on the wrong path. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make when we feel lost is assuming that it must mean you're doing the wrong thing. That if our business feels messy, then we must be messing it up. Or if we don't feel sure of ourselves right now, then we must somehow be off track. But I really don't think that that is always true. A lot of the time, especially in a creative business, feeling lost is not necessarily a sign that you're failing. Sometimes it's just a sign that you care deeply about what you're building, or that you've outgrown an older version of your business and you're in that awkward in-between stage where the next version hasn't fully taken shape yet. Sometimes it's that you can see too many possible directions at once and you haven't yet found a clear way to sort through them. And that is very different from having no potential or no future in what you're doing. I think a lot of creative people are naturally interested in a lot of things, and that can be such a strength, but it can also make things feel harder than they need to. When you can imagine lots of ideas, lots of directions, and lots of ways that your business could grow, it becomes really easy to end up feeling pulled in 10 different directions at once. And instead of recognizing that as a fairly normal part of being a creative person, you start making it mean something bad about yourself. You start telling yourself that you're inconsistent or flaky or bad at sticking to things, when actually the real issue might just be that you've got too many possibilities in front of you and not enough structure to decide what deserves your attention. And I think that that matters because the way you interpret feeling stuck shapes what you do next. If you tell yourself that feeling lost means that you're broken or incapable, you'll probably just spiral and make things even harder than it needs to be. But if you can see that as a sign that something needs simplifying, or a decision needs making, or that you need to pay closer attention to what's actually pulling at you, then that opens a much more useful response. And before I go any further, this is exactly the kind of thing I've been sharing over on my Substack. It's the deeper behind the scenes side of building a creative business, the mindset side of it, and all the messy in-between bits that don't always fit neatly into a video. I've just written an article about my first paid speaking gig where I delivered an illustration workshop to over 100 people. It's really about stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something before you feel ready, which I think ties into this conversation more than people realize. So if you enjoy reading articles and going deeper into that side of the conversation, I'll leave the link in the description below, or you can search the Creative Juice Club on Substack and you can subscribe over there too. But coming back to this feeling of being stuck, I think a huge part of it comes from the way creatives are trying to solve the problem in the first place. So let's talk about that next. Why do creatives so often feel stuck? Why do so many creative people end up feeling like they don't know what they're doing, even when they're talented, they're hardworking, and full of ideas? I think there are a few big reasons. The first is that there are too many ideas all at once, and I know this one very well. When you're creative, ideas come constantly. The problem is that every idea comes with potential, so it's not easy to dismiss them. Every single idea might work, or it might be the thing that changes things. And so you end up in this cycle where new ideas feel like progress, but actually they keep pulling you away from going deeper on anything you're already doing. So instead of building clarity, you're constantly restarting from scratch. The second reason is comparison disguised as research. And this one is sneaky, and I truly believe it happens to every creative, no matter where they are on their business journey. Sometimes we tell ourselves we're learning, we're getting inspired, or that we're doing market research by seeing what other people are doing. And some of that is genuinely useful, but there's a point where it stops being helpful and starts making everything worse. Because the more people you watch, the more paths you see, and the more paths you see, the more likely you are to start doubting your own. You see one person building a product-based business, then you see another building a personal brand, maybe someone that you follow has started doing coaching, or an artist you love has started licensing their work, another one is growing on YouTube, maybe one of your friends is smashing in-person markets, and then another is building a membership platform. Suddenly your brain goes, wait, am I doing the wrong thing? Should I be doing that or this instead? Have I missed something? Am I behind? Am I building the wrong kind of business? And that constant exposure to other people's certainty and success can make your own path feel weaker than it already is. But in general, you're often comparing your messy middle to someone else that is 10 steps ahead. The third reason is trying to think your way to feeling certain. So a lot of us sit there waiting to feel sure before we make any move. We think that if we just reflect a bit more or stare at our business long enough, eventually everything will click into place and we'll suddenly know exactly what to focus on. But most of the time, it doesn't happen like that. You don't figure things out by sitting still and thinking harder. You usually figure them out by trying things, paying attention, and seeing what actually fits. That might mean testing, making, sharing, adjusting, and learning by doing. And obviously, we'd all love to know before we begin whether something is worth pursuing. We want certainty. We want proof that if we commit to something, it will definitely be the right decision. But creative business just doesn't work like that. A lot of the time, you only get the information after you start. And once you understand all of that, the next question becomes, okay, so what do you actually do about it? So if you're feeling a bit lost in your creative business, here is a practical way you can start finding your direction again. Step 1, notice what keeps coming back. Before you make another big decision, throw everything out or pivot for the 5th time, pause and look for patterns. What ideas keep resurfacing? What themes can you just not stop talking about? What do you keep researching even when nobody is making you? This is important because not every idea matters equally. Some ideas are just passing excitement, really they're distractions, or if you're really honest with yourself, they're avoidance. It might just be something shiny and appealing because it's new. Then there are some ideas that you just keep coming back to because there's something there drawing you in. And I think instead of treating all ideas as equal, it helps to start noticing which ones have a pattern to them. And I think this is where a lot of people miss what's right in front of them because they're waiting for some huge obvious sign, but usually it's quieter than that. Usually it looks like the thing that you keep coming back to, the audience you keep wanting to help, or the format that you keep wanting to create in, even if it's not what the other creatives you're following are doing. That's the stuff worth paying attention to. Step 2 is pick one thing to test properly. So at some point, you do have to choose. I don't mean forever, but you have to focus on one idea long enough to actually learn something. And I think this is where a lot of creatives stay stuck because they want direction, but they don't want to close down other options. They want to keep every possibility open just in case. But the problem is when everything stays open, nothing gets enough of your energy to tell you whether it could actually work. So if you've got 5 directions in your head right now, ask yourself which one feels most aligned with where I am right now, and which one am I actually willing to commit to exploring for a little while. Then choose your direction. And again, it doesn't mean tattooing it on your forehead and declaring that this is who you are forever. It just means saying for the next few months or for the next project, I'm going to give this my full attention. The point is to stop hovering over your business and actually go into something deeply enough to get real feedback, because you can't learn enough from half trying 10 different things. Step 3 is to give enough time to reveal something. So a lot of people do choose something, but then they abandon it so quickly that they never get any meaningful data from it. But it often takes longer than that to see whether something actually has potential. Sometimes you need time to get better at communicating the thing to your audience. You might need time to refine it and understand whether you actually enjoy it in practice. So whatever you choose, you need to give it enough consistency for long enough to actually find out whether it can work for you. Now, some of you might be shouting at me saying, you have been focusing, you've been showing up, you've been consistent, and you're trying to build something properly, but it still feels like it's not working the way that you hoped it would. And that is what we're going to talk about next. So what if you've been consistent and it's still not working? Maybe your audience isn't growing, or people seem to like what you make, but they're not really buying it. You might have built something that you genuinely enjoy, but it's not bringing in the kind of traction or income that you'd hoped for. And I think that kind of stuckness can feel even heavier, because now it's not just confusion, it's disappointment. It's that feeling of, I have been trying, I've been consistent, I haven't given up straight away this time, so why does it feel like it's not working? And when that happens, it's very easy to jump to one of two conclusions. Either you start thinking that maybe you're just not good enough, or you convince yourself that it was the wrong idea in the first place. But I don't think that either of those are always true. A lot of the time, the issue isn't necessarily the thing itself, it's the way it's being communicated, the way it's being positioned, whether the right people are seeing it, or whether they really understand why it matters to them. And that's an important distinction, because it means that you don't need to throw everything away just because the results aren't there yet. And at the same time, I think it's worth being honest that loving something and building a business around it aren't always exactly the same thing. You might really enjoy making the work, and that absolutely matters. But if you want it to support you financially, then there does have to be a point where you can step back and ask whether people understand the value of it, whether it's being seen by enough of the right people, and whether the business side is strong enough to hold up the creative side. So if this is the kind of way you're feeling stuck right now, I think the better question is not just why isn't this working, but what part of this isn't working? Because that gives you something much more useful to look at. Is it the visibility? Is it the offer, the messaging, that people enjoy your content but don't know what to do next? Is it that the thing you love is real and valuable but no one knows why they need it? That is a much more helpful place to work from than immediately assuming that you've failed. Sometimes you just need a clearer bridge between the work you love making and the people you want to connect with it. So whether you've been feeling stuck because you've got too many ideas, or because you've been pouring energy into one thing and it still isn't giving you the results that you hoped for, I think the important thing is to not let that feeling turn into shame or self-doubt. Instead, it's about getting more honest with yourself about what's working and what's not, more specific about who you're trying to reach, and look at what's actually happening before you decide what needs to change. I think one of the reasons this can all feel so heavy in creative business is because the work is usually tied so closely to yourself. It's your taste, your ideas, your creativity, often your identity too. And when things feel messy or uncertain, it rarely feels like just a practical problem. It can feel personal in a way that's hard to explain to someone that hasn't built something for themselves before. And I know that feeling because I've definitely had seasons where I've had loads of ideas, loads of things I've wanted to make or explore or build into the business, and instead of feeling excited, it just felt noisy. Like there's too much in my head or too many directions pulling at me and too many possibilities all asking for the same attention at the same time. And when you're in that kind of space, it's very easy to convince yourself that the answer is to just think a bit harder or plan a bit better. But honestly, I don't think that that's usually where the answer comes from. In my experience, you often work things out by doing, by trying things, by seeing what actually feels right once you're inside it, rather than just thinking about it from a distance. And I know for me, I've definitely done things in my creative business purely because I've seen other people doing them successfully. And at the time, I probably wouldn't have listened if someone had told me that it wasn't right for me. I am the kind of person who often needs to see it for myself. I need to understand the reality of it, or realize how much work it actually takes, or get far enough into it to notice that it's not really moving me in the direction that I thought it would. And I actually don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I am all for learning by doing, and I'm not expecting anyone to watch this and suddenly never follow another idea unless it's perfectly thought through. But I do think that there's a difference between learning through experience and staying stuck in something that clearly isn't helping just because you feel like you should keep going. So if you are in the middle of trying something and you're starting to realize that it's spreading you too thin, or it's just keeping you busy without really moving your business forward, I think it's okay to stop and be honest about that. That doesn't mean that the whole thing was a waste of time. Sometimes the lesson was the point. Sometimes you needed to do it to understand why it wasn't the right fit. But once you know that, you're allowed to put it down and give your attention back to the thing that matters. So if your creative business has been feeling messy lately, like you've been doubting yourself more than usual, or you've found yourself changing direction and wondering why everyone else seems so much more sure of what they're doing, I just want to leave you with this. Feeling lost does not automatically mean that you're on the wrong path. It doesn't mean that you're failing or that you are not capable of building something meaningful. A lot of the time, it just means that there's too much noise around you. There's too many thoughts competing for attention and not enough space to really see what matters most. And if that's where you are, I don't think the answer is to be harder on yourself or shame yourself for not having it all figured out yet. I think the answer is usually to slow things down a bit, get honest about what's really going on, and pay attention to what keeps showing up beneath the noise. I don't think most people find their way by suddenly having some huge, perfect realization. More often, I think you build your way there gradually by making a decision, learning from it, adjusting, and then taking the next step from there. And don't forget, if you enjoy these deeper conversations around building a creative business, then I'm sharing that over on Substack. I've just written a piece about my first paid speaking gig where I delivered an illustration workshop to over 100 people. And it's really about that self-doubt and the experience of doing something that felt scary before I felt truly ready for it, and how you can do the same for your creative business. So if you'd like to read that and subscribe for more kinds of reflections, I shall leave the link in the description below, or just search the Creative Juice Club on Substack. You're working on your creative business, not just scrolling or procrastinating, but you've been at your desk for hours. You've got a list of things that you've been moving through. Maybe you've posted something, you've replied to some emails, and at some point late in the afternoon, you sit back and you think, what did I actually do today? Like, what moved my business forward? And probably the answer is not much. Not because you weren't working, but because being busy in the day-to-day and making progress are not the same thing. And for a really long time, I was very, very good at being busy. And if that sounds familiar, if you've had that specific feeling of a full, exhausting day, but somehow didn't move anything forward, then this video is for you, because I want to walk you through the 5-part system that completely changed how I run my creative business. And this isn't a productivity hack or a magical morning routine. It's a proper framework that you can actually use. And by the end of this, you'll have something you can take away and start building with straight away. And the reason that really busy day, but nothing moving forward kept happening, for me at least, was that I had no external system holding any of it. So let me show you what changed that and how I actually run my business now. And I'm not just going to tell you about it, I'm going to show you. So system 1, goals. So I'm using October to house my entire business, but you can use whatever planning tool works for you. The important thing isn't the tool, it's having somewhere that your goals actually live, like somewhere visible that you can come back to regularly rather than something that you write down in January and then never look at again. Because with any planning or any list of tasks, you need to know what you're actually working towards. And I think this is the step that most creative business owners skip, not because they don't care about their goals, but because goals can feel a bit abstract and overwhelming to sit down and actually write out properly. But this is one of the most useful things that I've done for my business, because when your goals are visible with actual action steps on how they're going to be achieved, everything else starts to organize itself around them. So your tasks stop becoming random and your weeks stop feeling reactive, because you take anything you're doing in your business and you ask, does this task move me towards this goal? So in October, the goals are broken down into layers: yearly, quarterly, monthly, and short term. And I want to show you how I actually use this, because I think seeing it in practice is so much more useful than me just describing it. So what I love about having my goals broken down this way is that it makes the big ones feel so much less overwhelming. So a yearly goal on its own feels massive and vague and honestly a bit paralyzing. But when you break it down, okay, what does this mean for this quarter? And what does this mean for this month? And suddenly it becomes something you can actually work with. And the bit that I think is the most useful part of all of this is that once a goal exists here, it becomes something I can break down into actual next steps. So it stops being something really vague, like growing my email list, and it becomes a set of real visible actions I can actually do, which is like the difference between a goal that happens and one that just lives in your head forever. So as I'm filling this out, I'd really encourage you to do the same, either in October or wherever you keep your business planning, because everything else I'm going to show you works so much better when it has a goal underneath it. So that's the goal sorted. But there's something that will derail you if you don't have a system for it, and that's the ideas. System 2, stop letting your ideas interrupt your business. So next thing I want to show you is what I do with all my ideas, because this is the thing that was keeping me up at night long before I had a system for it. And I don't just mean big ideas, I mean the constant stream of small ideas too. A new product, a new video topic, a real concept, something you want to tweak on your website, the kind that arrives at a really inconvenient time and it demands your attention whether you're ready for them or not. And one of the habits that has made the biggest difference for me recently is something really simple. Instead of writing random ideas in my notes app on my phone, I put them straight into the brain dump in October. And I'll be honest here, it's taken me a little while to get into this habit, because for years I've written a mix of everything into my notes app. Like some of the stuff in there, I don't even remember what it means or what it was for. But I'm so glad I started this new habit, because instead of one endless pile of random thoughts, I can categorize ideas, move them into folders, and give them a status. And something about having that structure just makes my brain feel so much calmer. Let's say you're working on something, you're making progress, and then you have an idea, maybe for a new product, a video topic, a real concept, a freebie that you could create to grow your email list. You're a creative and your brain is just wired this way. The ideas just feel urgent and exciting and important. You're genuinely worried that if you don't capture it right now, it'll disappear. So you either drop what you're doing and you follow it, which means the thing that you are actually working on doesn't get finished, or you try and hold that idea in your head while you finish your task, which means that you're doing neither thing properly and you probably lose the idea anyway. So the teaching here is really simple, but it makes an enormous difference. Every idea needs somewhere to go, but not every idea deserves your attention today. Those are two separate things, and I think a lot of people merge them into one. So the system is your brain dump, your idea bank, but not just one endless pile where everything lives equally and then nothing is ever actionable. You need categories. Active ideas, which are the things you're actually working on or planning to work on soon. Later ideas, which might be the things with real potential that just aren't for this season. So you could categorize your boards into content ideas, product ideas, launch ideas, things you want to explore at some point, but not yet. Because when everything is in one undifferentiated undifferentiated list, it's overwhelming and nothing moves. But when your ideas have a home and a status, you can capture freely without it derailing your day. And your brain can actually let go because it knows the idea is somewhere safe. Then there's the on your mind board. So that's pinned right at the top as soon as you open it, and it becomes my version of the back of the napkin moment. Like if I'm in a rush or an idea comes to me while I'm on the school run, I just drop it in there quickly and move on. And then later, when I actually have 5 minutes to think, I can go back into it and move things into the right place. So nothing gets lost and my focus stays intact. But capturing the idea is only half of it, because I think we've all got this graveyard of ideas somewhere, the things we wrote down, got excited about, and then nothing happened. And the bit that actually makes the difference, it's what happens next. And I think that's actually the thing that separates the creatives who follow through on their ideas from the ones who don't. And it's not talent or motivation or even time, because most of us are pretty good at the ideas. We're just not always good at knowing what to actually do with them next. The habit I've been building, and this is the bit I'd really encourage you to think about, like whatever system you're using, is that when an idea feels ready, I try to give it a next step. It doesn't need to be a full plan or an entire project, just one step, because that one thing is what moves it from someday to actually happening. Now in October, I can do that by clicking convert and turn an idea straight into a task, which then appears in my task manager, which sounds small, but it genuinely changes how many ideas I actually follow through on. So that is the ideas captured and organized, but having a tidy system doesn't automatically tell you what to actually work on next. So system 3 is the needle mover system. Stop confusing busy work with progress. So system 3 is probably the most important shift in the whole framework, and this has taken me longer than I'd like to admit to really internalize. So there are tasks that feel productive and there are tasks that actually move your business forward, and they are not always the same thing. And the tricky part is that the tasks that feel productive can be really convincing. Like maybe you found yourself reorganizing your studio because if you just have a fresh, inspiring space, the ideas will follow. Or maybe you've spent an hour choosing a new font for your website or hiding your desktop folders when you've actually got a launch to plan. And I'm not saying that those things are totally worthless. Like sometimes they do need doing, but there have been a lot of days where they became the thing that I did instead of the harder, more important thing. And I think that's because they feel manageable and satisfying in a way that the harder thing doesn't, especially on the days where my energy was lower or maybe my confidence was taking a bit of a wobble. And I had a really specific moment of realization around this that I think will land for a lot of you. So I had a morning where I batched a load of Instagram carousels. I had a list, I worked through it, I felt productive, I ticked things off, and by lunchtime, I felt like I had a good work session. And then I sat back and I thought about where my reach actually is coming from. I was thinking about where the trust was being built and where the sales were actually coming from. And the actual answer for me was YouTube, not Instagram. And this might look totally different for you, but for me, YouTube is the thing that's compounding, finding new people and supporting the business in a way that kept going even when I stepped back. So a better use of my time that morning might have been planning the next few YouTube videos, not because Instagram doesn't matter, I still love that platform for connecting with people, but I wasn't really being honest with myself about where my effort was actually moving the needle. So what I do now, and this is something that you can apply, is separate my tasks into 3 simple groups before I start my day. The things I must do today, which are the needle movers that are directly connected to my current goals. Then there's the things I should do today if I can get to them. And finally, the things that I could do, which are the nice to haves, the tweaks, the things that I want to do but can also wait. Now, of course, some of your must-do tasks are going to be the maintenance side of your business, and that's completely normal. You need to pack orders, you need to reply to customer emails. That stuff matters and it has to happen, but the key is making sure that the maintenance tasks aren't taking up the whole day at the expense of everything else. So if you've got a morning of packing orders, try to protect even a small pocket of time that builds the business too, like uploading a listing or writing an email to your list, like something that can keep working beyond today, because the maintenance keeps the business running, obviously, but the needle movers are what make it grow. System 4 is the bigger picture. Stop planning your business one random day at a time. So here is a question I want you to think about honestly. How do you decide what to work on each day? For a really long time, my answer was essentially, I'd sit down, look at what was urgent, think about what I'd been meaning to do, maybe check my phone for anything that I'd noted down, and then start working on whatever felt most pressing or most manageable in the moment. And that sounds reasonable. It sounds like planning, but what it actually was reacting. I was reacting to the most urgent thing, the most visible thing, or the thing that felt most approachable on a particular morning, not to any kind of bigger picture or a season or a goal or a launch timeline, just whatever was loudest that day. And the problem with that is that your daily tasks become completely disconnected from anything bigger. You're not building towards anything specific, you're just managing whatever's in front of you. And it means that a lot of the work you do is random. It's not bad or wrong, it's just random and untethered, so it's not really part of a direction. So the big picture system is about planning in layers. And once this clicked for me, it changed the shape of my whole working week. So the outermost layer is your year or your season. What launches, campaigns, products, or focus periods are you coming up with? What are you actually building over the next few months? This doesn't have to be a rigid plan, it can shift and evolve, but having some sense of the bigger shape of the next season means that everything underneath it has context. That monthly, in order to achieve those bigger picture goals, what needs to be built, filmed, written, or promoted this month specifically, given what's coming in the season ahead? What are the things that need to move forward this month for the season's goals to actually be reachable? Then weekly, what are the actual action steps given the month's needs? And then today, what is the single most important next thing given everything I've just said? And the transformation that happens when you plan this way is that your tasks stop being random. I need to post today, it becomes the post that supports the launch. And instead of thinking you should probably film something, it becomes this video builds demand for the offer that I'm releasing next month. Everything is connected to something. Your daily work stops feeling like maintenance and starts feeling like progress, because it actually is. The fifth system is repurposing. Now, you might be wondering what repurposing has to do with organization, but stick with me here, because the way you approach your content and your launches has a huge impact on how organized and in control your business feels day to day. And the single biggest thing that changed for me was no longer starting from scratch. If every piece of content and launch plan feels like a brand new undertaking, you're not just spending more time on those tasks, you're spending mental energy. So the fifth system is really simple. Build it once and reuse it. So the fix is simpler than most people think. So for example, once you've planned a launch that worked, you never need to build that plan again from scratch. You can duplicate it, tweak what needs changing for this particular launch, and off you go. The thinking's already been done, so the structure is already there. And that one habit of saving what worked and reusing it changes how your business feels over time. Because instead of every launch being this enormous undertaking that costs you weeks of planning energy, it becomes something you can move through much more quickly. Not by cutting corners, but by taking what you've already done and reapplying it in the future. And it's not just launches that you can do this with. I think when most people hear repurposing in terms of content, they think of reposting an old reel and hoping that no one notices, but that's not really what I mean. What I mean is making one piece of content work for you in multiple ways. So a carousel that you post on Instagram can become an email to your list, and then that email can be a blog post, and that blog post could be an idea for a long form video, and then that video can be clipped into 3 short form videos, and suddenly one idea, one single piece of thinking has given you a whole week's worth of content across different formats and different platforms. The principle underneath all of this is really simple. The more you systematize, the less you have to rely on motivation, because motivation is unreliable even when you love what you do, there will always be weeks where you're tired or life is full. But when your business is built on systems rather than motivation, you keep moving even in the seasons where the energy isn't there. And don't get me wrong, these systems don't do the actual work for you. You still have to show up and actually create the content. But there is a huge difference between sitting down to create something when you already know what it's about and who it's for and how it connects to everything else you're putting out there, versus sitting down with a blank page and no idea where to start. And my version of creating content and planning launches is so much lighter. And when you can multiply that across every week of your year, you start to understand what organization can actually give you. It's not just about tidier folders, it's about having more energy for the actual work. And I'm gonna give you a bonus system because I think I said 5 at the start of this video, and I think we're actually on system 6. So this last bonus system ties all of this together, because you can have the best intention, the clearest goals, and the most repeatable system, and it can still feel scattered. And usually when that happens, it comes down to one thing: knowing exactly where your business is at. So this is something I used to waste a huge amount of time on without even realizing it. And that's figuring out where I actually am with everything. Not in a big picture sense, but on any given afternoon. Like, what's in progress, what's waiting on something, what haven't I finished yet, what's urgent and what can wait. Because without a clear answer to those questions, every time you sit down to work, you end up spending the first 20 minutes just trying to remember where you left off. And that's time and energy that disappears before you've even started. And the habit that changed this for me was really straightforward. I stopped keeping tasks as one long to-do list and started breaking them down properly. Because plan a launch on a to-do list tells you nothing. It doesn't tell you what you've already done, what's next, or how far away you are from finishing. But here's what used to happen when I tried to fix that. I would start breaking things down. Like, I'd write the sales page, film the announcement video, plan the email sequence, and then somewhere in the middle of the list, I'd also have reply to that customer email, or order more packaging, or fix the banner on my website. And suddenly my launch plan and my general business admin were all tangled up in one chaotic list. So I'd start a new list and then a new one for like a different part of my business, and I'd end up with these multiple lists where I didn't really know where to start or how to keep track of all the spinning plates. So the fix isn't more lists, it's having a separate space for separate parts of the business. So the launch tasks live with the launch, the content tasks live with the content, and the general admin has its own home. And within each of those, the tasks are broken down into actual steps. So you always know exactly where you are within each part of your business. And what I love about being able to see all of that at a glance inside Artova, with the priorities, the statuses, the due date, is that nothing is hiding in your head. It's visible and trackable. And when your whole business is clear and categorized, it stops feeling like something you're constantly trying to catch up with, and it starts feeling like something you're actually in control of. When did you actually last sit down and create? Not content, not product photos or captions about your process, but just make something. And if your answer is a while ago, I don't think that's because you've lost your love for it. I reckon it's because your week is so packed with stuff that isn't the actual making. Most of the parts that are running your creative business have become so ingrained in your day that you don't even clock it as the thing that's eating your creative time. So today, I want to walk through 5 things that are stealing that time and the 5 shifts that actually get that back. Not by working more hours or by getting up at 4 a.m, but by really looking at where the time is going. So if you're watching this, the chances are you started this whole thing for the love of creating. You didn't get into this for spreadsheets or product descriptions or figuring out the perfect flat lay for a product photo, unless of course you're a photographer. But then the business happened, and somewhere along the way, the creating has gotten smaller and smaller. And a lot of you are probably blaming yourselves for that, like thinking that you've lost your motivation or your passion or your discipline. But I really don't think that that is what's happening. And that's what today is all about. So let's get into shift 1. Name what's actually stealing your time. So shift 1 might feel like a boring one, but stick with me. So you feel exhausted at the end of the week, you feel behind, like there's just no time to to create. But if I asked you to tell me hour by hour where last week's time actually went, you probably couldn't. And I genuinely couldn't have either until I started really paying attention. So a few years back, I used to run these Patreon goodie boxes, proper curated little parcels that land on subscribers' doorsteps. And I wanted them to feel really, really special. So I started making a load of stuff to go in, made by hand. And one round, I made 40 pencil cases by hand. Now, I sublimated the fabric, I sewed in the zips, the lining, the whole shebang. And behind the proper perfectionist that I am, each one took a minimum of 2 hours from start to finish. And that was with setting up a production line as well. So that's at least 80 hours on the pencil cases alone. And that was before I'd even started on the rest of the box. And somewhere in between all of that, there was also the admin, the content creation to promote the theme of the next box. And I just felt absolutely shattered at the end of every subscription that I made. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because I never stopped to think about it. I just kept powering on. And I know that so many of you are in the middle of that right now. Nobody fully understands it until they're in the middle of it. But selling your work doesn't just add the job of selling to your week. It adds about 15 jobs that you didn't see coming. And those jobs aren't announced and you then start putting them into your schedule. They just creep up on you and just sort of appear in your day. And that meant that the time I was creating shrunk to almost nothing. And I started wondering how I ever had the time to be creative. So I don't think you've lost your creativity. I think that by the time you've done everything else, you've got nothing left to give. So to make this video or podcast episode, wherever you're listening, actually actionable, I want you to try tracking your week. Actually write down where your time is going. Is it listings, photography, email time, packing time, content time, whatever your version of all of this looks like? Because once you can see the areas that are draining your time, but not necessarily like bringing in results, you can start making some changes. And that brings us to shift 2. What to actually do with all of that work once you've realized where your time is going. So shift 2 can change your whole week. So I want to spend a couple of minutes on it because I think it's the most underrated fix in the way that people run their creative businesses. So every time you switch between modes, your brain has to work extra hard to keep up. That's real mental energy wasted when it really doesn't need to. So creating artwork or whatever it is that you make is one mode, writing a product description is another, then switching to photography or emailing a customer, maybe filming a reel. Every time you flick between tasks, your brain has to rewire. And studies show that this is true. So by the end of your working day, you're absolutely shattered and you can't really understand why, because on paper, you didn't even do that much. Except you did, because your brain switched between about 15 different modes. And that can be a real cost. And I just know that that's how a lot of us creatives work. The fix is going to take practice to put into place. And as creatives, it's not easy to get into this rhythm, but with any skill, it takes time to pick up. And that is batching. Maybe Mondays are dedicated listing days, or you set a chunk of time aside for your filming work and you do not edit that footage until you're in your editing batching session that you've pre-planned in your calendar. And when you start batching and you can finally get ahead of yourself, which by the way might take a few months to get to that point, but once you're properly streamlining your days and most of your work is batched ahead of schedule, that is when you can actually find the time to create. And I appreciate that we don't all have an entire Monday just for listings. I certainly don't with 3 small children at home. But if we can streamline the limited time that we have, we're gonna get much more out of it. So it's not about how many hours you have, it's about whether the hours you've got are optimized. 2 hours of clean, uninterrupted creative time will be 4 hours of broken time where you're flipping between 5 different jobs. So the question isn't how do I find more hours in my week, it's how do I protect the hours that I've already got, which means we need to talk about where everything in your business actually lives. Because you can batch all you want, but if you can't find what you need when you sit down to do it, you're back to chaos mode. So shift 3 is about what happens when there's nowhere in your business to hold anything. And most of us don't even realize that that's what's missing. We just think that we're bad at planning. So here's what that might look like in real life. Say you've got to launch something, like you've got a product idea or a collection that you want to get out there, or something you've been meaning to properly push for months, but every time you sit down to actually plan it, there's nowhere for it to live. Like there's no home for the idea, there's no place to put the steps into making a plan to actually promote it. So what ends up happening is you just wing it. You post stuff, hope someone bites, post some more, and then when the launch doesn't land the way you'd hoped, you don't even know why. Was it the product, the timing, the way you promoted it? You genuinely can't tell because there's no plan to look back at or nowhere to reflect. So you just shelve it and move on. And then the next launch goes exactly the same way. Let me know in the comments if you have felt this way, because I feel like I'm just describing exactly what I was feeling when I started my business. And I just know that if I felt it, then others feel it too. And that's when I realized the problem that most creatives have isn't a lack of ideas about how to organize their business. It's about those ideas and plans for their systems not having a home, so they never compound. Okay, so we've talked about having systems and how they can save you time so that you can spend more time on actually creating. Now let's move on to shift 4, which is something that I definitely struggled with. Setting a boundary on good enough. So shift 4 is the one I see all the time, and it's the one that I see creators naming as a problem, and that's perfectionism. We've been told our whole lives that being detail obsessed is a good thing for an artist, which it can be, but that detail, that obsession applied to the business bits of the business will eat into your week and you won't even notice it happening. Let me give you a really specific example with my email marketing. So I was spending hours on them, properly hours, getting the layout right, the colors, the sections, the little branded header. It had to look a certain way before I'd send it. And I genuinely thought that that was the right thing to do, that people would appreciate the effort and the artistry in it. And then one week, I just didn't have the time, so I sent a plain email. Just words, no layout, no design, no fuss. And I nearly didn't send it because it felt too simple, but my open rate went up. People actually replied to it and more people read it than usual. And that was a bit of a wake-up call because I realized that the layout I'd been spending hours on wasn't helping. If anything, it was actually getting in the way because people don't need a perfectly designed newsletter. They just wanted to hear from me. And the same is true for so much of the business stuff. That 47th tweak to your caption doesn't move the needle, or the 8th version of your product photo probably looked the same as the 3rd attempt you did. At some point, good enough really is good enough, and that time you save goes straight back into the actual creating. So shift 4 is just this. Give the business tasks a time limit and stick to it. 30 minutes for emails, 20 minutes for a product photo, maybe 15 for a caption, and when the timer goes, it's done. Because done is always better than perfect. And perfect is usually just another word for procrastination. So shift 5. You've worked on fixing what's stealing your time. Maybe you've started batching the bits that were draining you and you've got a system that holds everything in one place, and now there's actually a bit of space in your week. So what do you do with it? You get creating again. But the problem I see, and I have been guilty of this myself, is that you need to protect your creative time the same way that you protect everything else in your creative business. Because when there's suddenly a gap in your week, what happens is you fill it with more admin, more emails, more scrolling, because we are so conditioned to try and be productive that unstructured creative time sometimes just makes us feel guilty because we should be doing something more useful with it. But that creative time is definitely not wasted time. It's the whole point. That's what this has all been building towards. So before your week fills up or you jump into your inbox and start adding to the multiplying to-do list, put creative time in the calendar first. Not at the end of the week as a reward for getting everything else done, but first. And I don't mean you need to block out entire days. I'm not saying you need 3 hours of uninterrupted studio time to make it count, but even 20 minutes properly protected in the diary with the phone face down is worth way more than 4 hours of broken time where you're half creating and half thinking about everything else that you should be doing. Now, I know that some of you will have watched my video where I said that you need to be a content creator first and an artist second. And out of context, that doesn't sound very appealing, right? And what I'm about to say might feel like a contradiction to that. So I just want to address it really quickly. If you haven't watched that video, go and watch it. I'll link it below, because what I meant by that is so much more nuanced than it sounds in a single sentence. But if you have watched it, you might be sitting there thinking, hang on, you told me to prioritize content and now you're telling me to switch off and just create. And the honest answer is yes, both things are true and it's a balancing act. Ideally, if you can sit down for a creative session and switch on the camera at the same time, brilliant. That means you're building your content library and creating in one go. That's the dream, but that's not always how it works. And I don't think that every creative session needs to become content. Some weeks you might film, some weeks you might just draw or make or sketch with no agenda and no camera, and that is okay too. Because a creative business that never actually makes space for the creating, that's not sustainable. The content creator side of you needs the artist side of you to stay alive. They feed each other. So yes, content creator first, artist second, but that only works if you're actually protecting the artist too. And I know that for some of you, the idea of blocking out creative time in your calendar sounds great in theory, but in practice, creativity doesn't work like that. I'm one of those people who can't just switch creative mode on because the calendar says that Tuesday 2 p.m. is drawing time. If I'm not in the mood, the artwork never turns out how I imagine. And I think that a lot of creative people are the same in that respect. So the key for me is having a system that's flexible enough to move things around without the whole week falling apart. That's genuinely one of the reasons why batching matters so much. Because if your content is done ahead of time, you're not in a position where creating for fun has to compete with creating for content, because the content is already handled for the week or the month. So when the creative mood does hit on a random Wednesday morning or 9 p.m. when the kids are in bed, you can actually just go with it. You're not sat there thinking, I haven't filmed for this week, so I can't spend time creating. So to me, it's less about rigidly blocking Tuesday 2 p.m. as creative time and more about making sure that the rest of your week is organized enough that when the mood does strike, you actually have got a space to say yes to it. Because that's really what all these 5 shifts are building towards. Not a perfect schedule, just a week that's organized enough to let the creating actually happen. I used to think if I just worked harder or found a few more hours in the day, that I'd finally get on top of everything I was trying to build in my creative business. And for a while, I kept trying to do that. I kept trying to squeeze more into the gaps, worked later into the night. And through that, eventually I'd find this perfect rhythm where everything just clicked into place. And I'd suddenly have time for all the ideas bouncing around in my head. But what I've learned over the past few years, especially after having kids, twins included, is that you don't actually need more time to be able to build something sustainable. What you need is a completely different way of thinking about how you're spending the time you already have. And more importantly, what you're choosing to build with that time in the first place. So I want to walk you through how to structure your creative business when you genuinely don't have endless hours to throw at it, when you're building around the cracks of your day or kids or a job or a very full life. And I'm going to share what I'm doing right now in real time, because this channel is all about sharing everything I've learned from growing my illustration business Fizz and Flourish, where I've sold thousands of physical products and even more digital products over the years. But now, as my software company Artova is growing and more of you are joining, I've been moving further and further away from the creative business side. And as well as sharing lessons from the past, I also want to be sharing things in real time with you as I'm learning them. So I've decided to try something new and creative again so that I've got something physical to build and share with you. And I'm going to take you behind the scenes of how I'm using all of my systems to run it, grow it, and share what I'm learning along the way. But this video isn't about that project specifically. It's about the structure behind it. Because whether you're launching something new or trying to manage what you already have, these principles will help you actually get it done when you don't have time to waste. The first shift that makes structuring your business so much easier when you have really limited time is making sure that every single thing you do serves at least 2 or 3 purposes at once. Because when you don't have endless hours in your day, you can't afford to spend time on things that only do one job. And this is where I see so many creatives getting stuck, because they're doing loads of different tasks and that all feels productive, but none of them are actually working together to move the business forward. So instead of thinking about your business as this long list of separate tasks that all need doing, you could start asking yourself, with every single thing you create or build, does this serve multiple purposes? Does it help me in more than one way? And when you start asking yourself that question with everything you do, it becomes a lot clearer, because you stop wasting energy on things that only tick one box. So let me give you a really practical example from what I'm building right now, because I am launching something called the Work in Progress Club, which is this monthly collectible subscription for creatives building their businesses. And the whole concept is built around making sure it serves multiple purposes, and not just for me, but for the people who join as well. It's a physical letter that arrives in the post each month, packed with creative prompts and challenges and little collectible pieces that actually help you take action in your business, stay accountable, and make progress on the things you keep saying you'll get to. And it's all wrapped up in a way that feels purposeful and aesthetically pleasing, like something you'd actually want to keep and use rather than just glance at and then throw away. But here's where that first shift comes in. The main vision behind this for me is community and connection. I want to build something that makes my community feel genuinely connected to each other and to me. And in a world where everything is becoming AI generated and our connections are increasingly limited to phones and computers, I wanted to send something real that lands on your doorstep. So that is the first purpose, community and connection. And then the second purpose is sending genuine value, because I don't want to create things just to make something pretty. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that approach at all. I've done it for years with my illustration business, but I've realized in the recent years, there really has to be a why behind what you create. So that is my why. But to make it possible for me to spend my time creating something with this much value, I have to turn a profit, because it's a business after all. So the third purpose is income, and a subscription model is a brilliant way to get consistent recurring income that helps run the actual business business without me having to constantly chase new customers every single month. And then the last purpose is growing my email list. So there are so many more resources and so much value that I can share with people who sign up to the Work in Progress Club, and having them on my list means I can keep supporting them beyond the monthly letter. So those are clear purposes from one project. I didn't just decide to launch a subscription because I fancied making something physical again. I chose this format specifically because it lets me be creative, it builds my community, and it generates recurring income all in one thing without having to add 3 or 4 separate tasks to my plate. I'm not running a product business, a membership, and a software platform as separate, disconnected things. Everything in my business is woven into the bigger picture of what I'm building. My upcoming Work in Progress Club makes perfect sense alongside my software, Artova, because Artova is the thing that helps creatives actually implement their plans, organize their business, and the club is a way of receiving that encouragement and accountability on a monthly basis. They work together, they support each other, and they both serve the same audience in different but complementary ways. And I think this is where a lot of product-based business creatives could really shift how they think about their business, because instead of just making random things that you think will sell, you start building an ecosystem where everything has a purpose to the bigger picture. So if you're an artist or a maker, that might look like creating a signature product that people love and come back for, and then building a newsletter or a membership that keeps those same people connected to you and buying from you over time. And then creating content that brings in new people into that world. So everything feeds into everything else rather than being scattered across 5 different ideas that don't really connect to each other. And I'm applying this same thinking to how I'm talking about the club as well, because this video I'm making right now is teaching you a principle. It's promoting the club, which, by the way, you can now join from the link in the description. I am launching in June, and if you join now, you will get a lovely letter in the post next month. So check the link in the description. And this video is also going to be evergreen content. So even the way I'm sharing about it serves multiple purposes. The second thing that made structuring my business with limited time so much easier is creating SOPs, which stands for Standard Operating Procedures. And I know that sounds incredibly corporate and boring, but stay with me because this has genuinely been one of the most valuable time-saving things I've done for my business. So when most people talk about SOPs, it's aimed at businesses with teams, because the idea is that if you need to onboard a new member of staff, having an SOP for how something is done is a brilliant way to limit the questions that they're asking you. It saves time on training, and it generally acts as a step-by-step guide for any procedure in the business so that you're not having to explain something or the same thing over and over again. But for me, someone without a team, SOPs have become invaluable in a completely different way because they save so much time. Have you ever sat down to do a task, maybe something technical that you don't do very often, and then you end up down a rabbit hole trying to remember how you did something or what button it was or what the setting was? Well, that used to happen to me all the time. But if you can just create an SOP once, and it doesn't have to be a huge document, some of my SOPs are like 2 steps, but it's 2 steps that I always forget. And having them written down and stored inside my SOP builder in Artova, it means that I have access to them daily, and I cannot tell you how much time I have saved. For example, I always forget how to do certain video editing techniques, and I used to end up watching the same YouTube tutorial videos months down the line, completely forgetting that I'd already figured that out before. So now I just have a quick SOP that says, here's how to do that particular transition, or here's the exact setting for that effect. And instead of spending 20 minutes searching through YouTube trying to find the right tutorial again, I've got it written down in 30 seconds and I can just get on with editing. It is a huge time saver for your business, and it's something so simple that most solo creatives never think to do. You build it once and use it forever. The third principle that makes this whole thing sustainable is building things once and letting them work for you over and over again, which is basically the opposite of how most creatives run their businesses, because we're so used to having to show up in the moment to make a sale. But when you have no time, you can't afford to be creating constantly, only for that to be lost in the algorithm within 24 hours. And this is where evergreen systems become absolutely essential. So with the Work in Progress Club, I'm setting up the sign up flow once, I'm writing the welcome email sequence once, I'm creating the templates and the branding and the packaging design once, and then all of that keeps working for me month after month without having to rebuild it from scratch. And it means that every month, the only thing I'm focusing on is the creativity and the look and the lessons and everything I'm putting into each actual letter, not the behind the scenes stuff. And that's not me being lazy, that's me being strategic, because I know that in a few months' time, when it's the school holidays and I've got a 4-year-old and 2-year-old twins running around every day for 6 weeks, I am going to be so grateful that I built this properly from the start. And this applies to content as well, because I'm creating this video right now as a searchable piece of content, which means it stands a much stronger chance of bringing people into the Work in Progress Club over time compared to something like a reel that disappears after a day or two. So I'm not just making content for the sake of being visible today. I'm building assets that have the potential to keep working for me in the background. And that's the kind of thinking that completely changes how sustainable your business feels. So let me give you an example from my illustration business, Fizz and Flourish, just so that you can see exactly how you might apply this to your own business. So I made multiple draw with me videos where I draw on my iPad, people draw along with me, and I share tips as I go. But in those videos, I'm using my own digital brush packs in my drawings. So when someone stumbles across those earlier videos and they see me using the Fizzy Toolbox brush pack, they can head to the link in the video description, buy the brush pack and get drawing. And that's great. That is a sale from a video I made years ago that's still working for me. But here is where it gets even better, because automatically in the background, something I set up once and haven't touched again is the email sequence. So a few well-written emails that get sent over the coming days or weeks to that same person who bought the Fizzy Toolbox. And inside that email sequence is another of my brush packs, the coloring pencil case, and then my textured paper pack. And obviously I'm sharing value as well, but I have had hundreds of additional sales from this method alone. And the thing is, they might have watched that video of mine once and then never looked at my channel again. Yeah, I've gained multiple sales from the same customer. It was easy to set up and it's still bringing in sales today, even though I'm not actively promoting. Because when you build things once and they keep giving back to you over time, you're not stuck in this cycle of having to constantly create new things just to stay afloat. You've got systems and content and products that are all working together in the background. And that gives you so much more breathing room to actually focus on the parts of your business that genuinely need your attention right now. So the fourth thing I'd focus on if I was structuring my business with limited time is choosing what compounds, because not everything you build is going to keep working for you in the same way. Some things burn bright and fast and then they're gone, like an Instagram story that disappears after 24 hours, and some things build momentum over time, like a YouTube video that keeps getting found months or even years after you published it. And when you have no time to waste, you need to be really intentional about putting your energy into the things that compound, because those are the things that give you the most return on the time you're investing. So for me, that is why I'm choosing to build the Work in Progress Club as a membership model. Now, maybe a membership or a subscription model isn't right for you in your business, and that's completely fine, but there are other ways to build things that compound and keep working for you over time. And let me give you a couple of examples of what that might look for you as a product-based creative business. So if you sell physical products, you could be building a signature product line that people collect over time. So instead of constantly launching brand new, unrelated products, you're creating a series where people want the whole set. Maybe it's a seasonal collection that comes back every single year, or a limited edition version of your bestseller, or different colorways of the same design. The point is that each new release builds on the momentum of the last one, rather than starting from scratch with a completely different product every single time. Or it could be about building wholesale and stockist relationships, because once you've got a shop that's stocking your work and it's selling well for them, they keep coming back to reorder without you having to pitch to them every single time. And each new stockist compounds your reach because they're bringing your work to their existing audience. People who already trust that shop and are much more likely to buy from you because of that trust. So instead of having to find every single customer yourself, you've got multiple shops doing that work for you, and that momentum builds over time. Now, I guess you could argue that everything builds momentum in some way, because if you do commissions, you get more orders through word of mouth, or you get better and faster as your skills improve. And yes, that's true, everything can build momentum, but the key difference here is that not everything saves you time or gives you your capacity back. Commissions still require you to show up and create something new every single time, whereas evergreen content or wholesale relationships or a membership are working for you even when you're not actively doing the work. The point is, you want to be building things that create momentum over time, rather than things that only pay off once and then you're back to square one. So when you're thinking about what to build next in your business, ask yourself, is there something that's going to keep working for me over time? Or is this something that only pays once and then I have to start again from scratch? Because when you're building with limited time, you need to be ruthless about choosing the things that compound, because those are the things that actually create long-term momentum, rather than just keeping you busy in the short term. So if you want to structure your business in a more strategic way and you're working with limited time like I am, let me know which shifts resonate with you the most. I genuinely love chatting all things strategy in the comments. So come tell me what you're working on or what you're struggling with right now. And if you're curious about the Work in Progress Club, go sign up now. The link is in the description. If you join now, the first month will be shipped in June. If you're watching this video way into the future, who knows what month it is, but you'll always sign up and get the following month subscription. It's going to be a monthly collectible subscription for creatives building their businesses, packed with prompts, challenges, and things to help you actually take action, all wrapped up in a way that's purposeful and aesthetically pleasing. And because I'm keeping postage costs to a minimum by designing everything to fit into a standard envelope, I'm able to open this worldwide, which I'm really excited about, because I know many of you are outside the UK and I've never really been able to offer something physical that doesn't cost a fortune to ship. So I'll be sharing everything I'm learning as I build this behind the scenes. So if you want to see how I'm using these exact systems to structure something new whilst running everything else, make sure you're subscribed. And that is a wrap on this video. So if you've stuck to the end, thank you so much. That is not a small time investment and I don't take it for granted. My hope is that you've come away with a clearer sense of how to get things out of your head and actually into a system that works for you. So every resource, freebie, and link that I have mentioned along the way throughout this video is linked in the description, so you'd have to try and scroll back and find it. And if you want to check out all the other free resources that I've made for you, they are over at thecreativejuiceclub.com. And if you're at the point where you're ready to stop running your business out of scattered notes and half-finished tabs, then that is exactly what I built Artova for. You can try it for free at artova.io. And if any of this landed with you, hit subscribe. My videos land every week. And if you want to watch the original Masterclass video, then go watch this video next. Just click here to watch.